Direct voice is when the spirit speaks through a trumpet, okay? And how they do it is the ectoplasm circulates from the medium's body and ultimately goes through the tip here. And right about here forms a voice box. So, and it's a spirit copy of the spirit's voice box, not the medium. So it's not going to sound like the medium. It's going to sound like whoever's talking from spirit. Okay.
Keep watching to learn more, and don't forget to subscribe.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, Mind, Body, Spirit University, a leader in fully accredited in-person and online U.S. college degree programs in the topics we cover here. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hi, you are watching New Thinking Aloud, produced by Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, and I am your guest host, Deborah Lynn Katz. While all of parapsychology is seen as controversial within the wider scientific arena, there is one area of parapsychology that really goes back to its roots, but is still considered one of the most contentious and controversial areas of all. And this is the subject of physical mediumship. Today, there are very few bona fide physical mediums, at least people who call themselves physical mediums. And today we're going to learn all about what that term means and why it's so controversial. And you're going to get to hear firsthand from one of the few people that seems to be genuinely producing effects. Now, I cannot prove in this interview that what our guest is saying is true or real. However, I have talked to several people who have attended her seances, and they have been very impressed. And I'm in the process of attempting to put together a research team to investigate further, and it seems like our guest will be open to that, as she will state during the interview. Now, I am approaching this interview from the perspective that this is real, and since we can't prove anything during an interview, what we can do is give our guest the benefit of the doubt, come from a perspective that what she is saying is true, and then really attempt to listen closely and find out her own experiences as she is going through these seances, as she is sitting in a cabinet, channeling spirits and producing phenomenon around her in the presence of many people. What is happening to her internally? What does it feel like? What is it like to channel another entity through one's body, or to produce ectoplasm and energy that is then turned into materializations, turned into apports that just fall from the ceiling, that can influence objects, have them levitate as high as a vaulted ceiling and flying around the room, having apparitions come and touch people and talk to people. What is it like from an insider's perspective? That's what we're going to learn today and gain today, is the inside perspective of a physical medium. So I hope that you will watch from that perspective, There's no way we can separate the internal skeptics within us. And our guest, Julie Adriani, does not expect us to do anything less. She will tell you firsthand that whenever anyone comes to a seance, they are rightly skeptical. So she's used to that. Now, Julie Adriani has been a physical medium now for a number of years. She started off having no idea she could do these things, and then she progressed and studied and learned. And we're going to get to hear about her background. She is formally a paramedic, and she spent many, many years working in a prenatal unit, assisting medical staff, and dealing with so many families that were grieving. And she has a lot to share on that level too. So I couldn't be more pleased to introduce you to Julie Adriani. So, Julie, I am so thrilled to be here with you. This is going to be such a special interview for so many of our guests who've never had the opportunity to hear directly from a physical medium.
Well, hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm happy to share.
Can you start off helping us to understand your background? How did this all start for you?
I was born and raised in Chicago, in the city proper. I come from a family with 5 children, plus my mom babysat. So there was always a lot of kids, and I was the youngest. So I was always kind of left to my own unless someone begrudgingly had to watch me and bring me with. So I had imaginary friends. And I remember seeing what I thought was the boogeyman when I was about 4 years old. And he scared me because he was always at my door. And I shared my bedroom with my 2 sisters. And he was just a middle aged gentleman, but he had on a hat, like a derby hat, kind of like the Englishmen would wear, or Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know if you're old enough to remember him, but that
Yeah.
type of hat. So I associated it with something scary, especially since my sisters couldn't see him. Cats and dogs, they sense my guides around me. I remember one time my sister brought home a stray cat and we kept it, but we hadn't had it too long. And right in front of my bedroom, where my guide always stood, it was the evening, the cat saw the guide and went 3 feet in the air and went wild. And I got all scratched up and I mean, it scared the cat terribly. So I knew that I wasn't the only one seeing him after I had that experience with the cat. But nobody really understood. They just thought it was my imagination. So they really didn't believe me. Later, when I was about 7, I was playing outside with my friends, and they had to go in the house because their grandmother came over with a cake, so they couldn't play outside anymore. Well, so I came in, and I felt really bad because I didn't have grandparents on either side. I had never met them. And so I was playing with my sister that hand game like Miss Mary Mac.
Mhm.
And while we were playing, I received what I now know was my first apport. From the ceiling came this beautiful white handkerchief that was embroidered and it had lace all around it, and it landed right on my shoulder. And my sister and I, we just got scared and we ran out of the room because we thought we saw it. It just like the ceiling was white and it just came out of the ceiling.
Oh
So
my gosh. And what did you do with it?
I kept it, but I can't tell you what happened to it. I mean, I think I really don't know what happened to it. Being a kid, I kept it for a while. And now I mean, ever since then, I've always loved doilies and old lace. But so that was my first experience with an apport. Now, my older sister, the next oldest, was 4 years older than me. And lots of times when we would be out playing, she would pull me. She learned that I had a lot of telekinetic energy. So when I would go under the streetlights, they would blink and make that noise like a crackle. So that became a game. Pull me under the lights, they'd go off, take me away, they'd go back on. And those are some of the very early signs I noticed, besides seeing spirit. We lived in a place for a while that was across the street from a cemetery. And her and I would sit on the front porch swing. And at night, we would literally see the spirit lights. And she saw them too, because we would dare each other who could sit there the longest before they came across the road. And then we'd run in the house. But when I think about it, those are the same type of lights that are created in the seance room or, in other people's seance rooms that I've been in. So
Can,
I know that they were spirit lights.
can you describe what they look like a little bit more? Like were they pinpoints or orbs or?
The ones from my childhood they were small orbs, maybe like golf ball size. They weren't pinpoints. Now I have both in my seance room. And I think that the elementals or the fairies are the tiny ones, almost like glitter. They look like somebody threw glitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the bigger ones. And then sometimes they're this big, like a big bubble. So I don't know what makes them larger unless it's just, I don't think there's any one being more important than the other. I just think it's a different type of consciousness.
Well, and so at what point did you start to realize that you had control over all of this and that you could call forth spirits at will?
That was later. In my early 20s, I started because in my teens I kind of pushed it away. When you're a teenager, you have so much going on in your body with your hormones, with growing, with boys. You're not thinking about anything like that. Um, so I started getting really, really bad anxiety attacks. And I thought that maybe I was losing my mind because I had heard stories of my grandmother seeing things and that she was crazy and she was institutionalized for a while because they thought she was crazy. But I know she was just mediumistic now, but in those days they didn't recognize it. So
Did could you describe some of her behaviors or what was happening to her? Did they tell you about that?
they just thought, she would see things, she would say things that weren't there or weren't true or what they could not see.
Okay, so some kind of hallucinations or well, they defined it as that or
Yeah. Yeah.
delusions or something.
hmm And my father also, he believed in aliens and he would talk your ear off in the 60s about aliens and consciousness and how religion had it all wrong. And so nobody liked that either. So he kind of um, kept it to himself after a while. But now he actually works with me with physical mediumship. He was an engineer in this life. And so he's very helpful. I
And
love him.
he's still alive, him in his living form or deceased form?
Deceased. He's in spirit.
Then at what point did you start to do seances? How did you get into all of that?
First of all, I never wanted to do this publicly. I always thought it was something private for me. I would help people privately, friends. I would do readings. If I knew something and they asked me, I would tell them, but it was nothing I ever set out to do publicly. Something happened to one of my children and he was actually brought to a hospital dead on arrival. And I was very, and that was the hospital that I worked at. So I you can't make a deal, but I made a promise that if he could be okay, that I would do what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I did never want to do it. I didn't want to be called crazy. I didn't want to be, it was really ingrained in me.
You said when your son was in the hospital, you made a promise that if he was okay, then you would really open up and devote yourself to these topics. But what made you say that? Like, what was happening where before that, that made you feel like you really were having a calling and needed to embrace this?
I sensed when people were going to die. I knew, even sometimes women that were expecting, I could communicate with the child, the unborn child. So I just had the confidence that I was communicating with spirit and that I could help people. But I always thought of it more as bereavement, as helping people through their grief. That was very important to me. I didn't want to do it because of, boom, boom, pow. I just wanted to help people.
And you mentioned you had been working at that same hospital. What were you a nurse?
I was not a nurse. I got hired when I was a paramedic to work and watch the cardiac monitors in the unit. And then it was in a neonatal unit.
Okay.
So it was a lot of things because I worked there 26 years and it evolved. And I actually volunteered on the bereavement committee for 13 years. So that was a good segue for me because we were able to do things for bereaved parents and help.
So you had a lot of contact with bereaved parents,
Yes,
grieving
every day.
families, people that were passing over.
Yeah.
And so, how old were you when you attended your first seance?
Well, as a child, we were playing under the porches in Chicago doing seances.
Were you
I thought everybody wanted to do that. Turns out I was one of the few. But so my first I practiced at home table tipping and I practiced readings with people. Once Zoom came on and once the internet exploded and people were doing classes, I soaked it up. I took anything and everything I could because I had 5 kids myself. And at that time, I was a single mother. So I couldn't go across the pond to Arthur Finley. I couldn't go to New York and take classes and leave. I had to work. So, but I started my circle work in 2013. That's when I attended my first circle with a group. And immediately there was phenomena.
And so tell us about that. When you started, was it your own circle and people came in that you invited, or was it someone else's and you happened to join in on that?
That first circle was someone else's, and it was in a metaphysical shop, and it was every Wednesday when they would close. And it ended a couple months later because they were afraid of what was happening because I was having some levitation and there were loud knockings and noises and people were getting afraid and they were dropping out one by one. I think we started with like 12 people and then it got down to where there was just me and another person. And then after that, I started sitting myself. Just
And during those early days when there would be knocking, where would it sound like the sounds were coming from?
in the shop, it would be like inside the wall, it would be a distance away from where we were. If there one time there was a fan on it, it almost sounded like, when you had a bike and the boys would put a card in the spoke and it would so
Yeah.
things are ticking, making those types of noises. There were some bottles of oil that levitated and like came across the room and dropped right in front of the table. And
Oh, wow.
we were actually doing billet cards that day. We were supposed to write on a card something that we wanted to accomplish or learn. And I had put down that I wanted a recipe for healing someone's migraines. And so I put it down, I put it in the basket, nobody looked at it, and when it was my turn, those bottles came off the shelf and they just landed on the table.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
scared everybody too, but every we still had a full group at that time. So that was amazing. I
Did
didn't know
you
what happened. I didn't know if it was me or, there could have been spirits in the shop. I wasn't really sure, or if it was a combination of a group.
and the bottles, did you see them as they floated through the air? And
Yes.
then did they break when they hit the table or they just gently landed?
They like crash landed, but they didn't break. It's like someone was holding them and then they dropped.
And about how heavy were they? Or
They
were they
were
small?
like the essential oil bottles, maybe
Oh,
an
yeah.
ounce or two, but they were glass. I mean,
Wow. And what were you thinking when that happened?
I was a little scared, to be honest, because I thought, is this my energy? I mean, I knew I was very telekinetic, but I did not ever think that I could do it. And I wasn't consciously doing it. I just asked spirit to show me what I needed to get or use.
Wow.
So,
And do you remember what the oils were? Since you were asking about headaches, the people might be
yeah. Oh, I have to
interested
think
in that.
about it. I can smell them in my head. Um, One of them was lemon oil, but one of them was very common, but it smells bad. I'll have to think about it.
Okay.
It's been a
Yeah.
That was 2013. I'm kinda old.
Yeah, I was curious because I get migraines, so it would be nice to know what that combination was, especially since they floated across the room like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then tell us about how you really started to develop at that point.
So, I never wanted to take myself out, put myself and, the public at my mercy without being properly trained, because I knew that I wanted to be able to talk to people the right way and leave people better off than I found them. So I started taking every class I could find and a lot of James Van Prague's classes.
Hmm.
And then I actually moved up to his level 2 in person and then the level 3. And he was kind enough to allow me and a few other students to go meet him in places. So I got to go on stage with him a few times and do platform mediumship. So that was wonderful. One time I got to do the announcing for him and another famous medium. I won't say his name, but yeah, it was really, it helped me so much because I was draining myself. I didn't know how to shut down, which I feel is a big problem for a lot of mediums. When you first start getting yeses and everything's going good, you don't want to shut down or shut it down because you think it might not come back. But it really drains your adrenal system. So it's very important to shut down and then open back up when you're about to read, but not to stay open all the time.
Explain to our audience what a platform reading is.
Okay, so platform mediumship is when the medium reads maybe an entire room full of people. So you will either throw it out there or you can narrow it down. Unless you specifically see a spirit behind a person, then you're going to go right to that person because their guides will light up or they'll send you in a certain area. So you know kind of the direction that you're going to go to. So they call it the direction. And so you will can it's different than a private reading because you're trying to give multiple readings, say within an hour, hour and a half. Maybe you'll get to read 12 to 14, 15 people. They won't be as long as a private reading, but everybody gets the message from their loved ones.
And do you ever find that you just don't know who the message is for, that it's coming in, but you don't know who it's for in the audience?
You know, um, I have not had that issue. if I start to say who I have and they're giving me or they're showing me what they want me to say, sometimes you have the opposite. Sometimes you might have 5 or 6 people wanting to take that information because they all had a bill, they all had, their maybe there was a gun involved in all of these situations, maybe there was more, so you have to go back in and keep giving more evidence so people, will know, "Well, it's not for me, I can't take that part of it," until you narrow it down to your person.
One of the things I've wondered about in situations like that is is it ever possible that if you get dialed into someone in the audience, if you'll psychically start to just pick up on stuff about them? So like maybe like the information was coming from a spirit. They said, "Hey, I think that's me." And then you zone in on them and just start to read them. Whereas if someone else had stood up, you would have psychically started to read them. Do you think that ever happens? Like the combination between psychic information and spirit communication.
Yes, it's possible, it's very possible. Yes. That's why if you're doing mediumship, you should really, first of all, know the difference in the feel and how, if you're working through your guides, it depends how you're working. Some people only work with their guide. Some people speak to the spirit people who are coming in for the other person. That's it's that communication. But it's absolutely some people read like that.
Yeah.
There are times when that happens. Yes.
How do you discern between when information is coming as communication from a spirit versus when it's coming in psychically?
I love psychic work and I love people, and I can always feel it's a different energy. It's a little bit denser than spirit. Spirit is a little higher, faster, higher vibration. And you can feel, I can feel. And that's something very important because I teach classes and I really have a lot of exercises because that's really, really important when you're learning because mediums can be a psychic, but not all psychics are mediumistic. So it's really important for them to know that the feel and and to really know their clairs. I've had people come to class that say they've been working for a while and they don't really understand that the clairs are not just psychic clairs. The clairs belong to your soul. They're part of you, and then you're going to use them with your mediumship work and your psychic work.
Mm.
That's why I love doing psychic work because that just sharpens your mediumistic skills by using and working with your clairs and knowing which one you're working with and trying to work with 2 or 3 at the same time in a reading, because I think it gives you a fuller, richer reading.
Tell us about at the point you really started to use the practices of spiritualism, such as going into a cabinet and doing the whole traditional setup of a seance. And maybe in just a brief summary, if you can let those in the audience who aren't really familiar with spiritualism or seances, how that works. And then share with us how much are you following that or departing from that tradition?
I was always fascinated with the old pictures of the cones, the trumpets, and, so as soon as I found Lilydale, as soon as I found people that, were doing it or supporting it, I went. So my first seance, I think, was in 2017 and 2017 or 2018. And I went to see a physical medium. And with his style of mediumship, he produced one very large stone that he called it an activation stone. So there was probably 20 people in this dark room in Western New York. and it was my first time. And so I kind of knew what was going to happen, but it was my first actual seance, and I got hooked, and I was called up to receive the activation stone. He said, "You don't have to take it, but if you take it, if you accept it, know that this is an activation stone. So whatever it is that you need to activate." So I took it and ran with it, and I loved it. And then I found myself a couple of teachers. I found one teacher online that was teaching physical mediumship from England, but it wasn't, I was with him maybe about 6 months or so, and it just wasn't like enough. It wasn't for me. And then I heard of Michael Shane, who was also a physical medium, and he was going to do some classes in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so I went. It was during COVID. And I thought, you know what? For once in my life, I'm going to do what I want to do. All my kids are grown, and this is it now. I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm doing it. So I went back and forth every week. I traveled more during COVID than I ever did, I think, in my whole life, which was stupid. But those classes, as soon as I connected, boom, my trumpet was up, going all around. I was sitting in the cabinet. I had been sitting for probably, well, since 2013 by myself. I would sit in a closet in the dark. I didn't have a cabinet, but I would use a closet. And I had people tell me the very first time I sat for trance, I transfigured. And the very first time I went to practice and do physical mediumship with his group, things were happening.
First, explain the definition of transfigured.
Okay. So transfiguration is when a medium's ectoplasm, and ectoplasm is a substance that comes out of a medium, and with the spirit help, it's a substance that can create materializations. That's what makes trumpets levitate. But over the face, it's called transfiguration, and it creates a mask, in other words. And it doesn't have to happen over a face. For me, sometimes it's my neck. I've had like faces almost protruding out of my neck or off the side of my head, but it changes the molecular structure of the medium's face, your appearance. And if you are in person and close, you can literally see it. You can see it moving. As ectoplasm is a live substance. So you can see it moving and building things.
And so, if we were to see it, what would it look like?
Well, the ectoplasm can change depending on what you've ate. If you've rested, sometimes it's very white and almost like a doughy kind of substance. Other times or other mediums, it just depends on the medium. It could be more of a mist, a white mist. And it also depends on your spirit team, but you definitely will see it. You can see, sometimes you see like beards growing. So it could also be dark. Like it doesn't really, it reflects the color of the red light if you're working in red light.
Okay. And so, for people unfamiliar with the whole setup, why would you have started in a closet and then go to a cabinet? Explain the history of that.
Now, there have been some mediums in the past, very few, but some that could work in the light with their ectoplasm. And it doesn't only depend on the medium, it would also depend on the medium's spiritual team. Okay, because they're the ones helping. I started doing it in my mental mediumship, sitting in the dark to help me focus just on letting everything out of my mind, like sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
And so I was already well prepared to sit in the dark, but the dark, the ectoplasm can build, and it will build and, become strong. if you go in the light, it dissipates.
And
So
why do you think that is?
it's something to do with the photons. I don't know the scientific part of it, but I know red light and blue light don't break down the ectoplasm as much. It has something to do with the cones and the rods that are in the light. And I do have some pictures where you can see a materialization next to me in the cabinet, but the light's up here, and you can see like, oh, it's only half the body, because as it tried to build, it was getting broken down. So
So you'll get just like parts of bodies, half bodies, not always. Do you ever see a full body of a
yeah,
spirit?
well, we get all of that. So when I do my weekly circle alone and there's not as many people, I don't have 20 people, I might only have 4 or 5 people. So there's not as much strength as if you have a circle of 20 people. We might there are materializations that walk the room because my sitters can see them, they get touched, they feel them. Sometimes they'll touch their hair, or they'll actually see them in and out of my cabinet because I have bells on my cabinet, so that if they're coming in and out and they move the curtain, you'll be alerted that something's happening.
Well,
So,
and to leave the cabinet, do, couldn't the spirit just go through the curtain? Do they
mhm,
need to open it, or
they
couldn't they
could.
just move through?
They could. They do, because some spirits are seen coming in the side or the back of the curtain. Um, when I'm working with another medium, which, would be Michael, we have sometimes up to 5 materialized spirits, solid, like that feel like solid humans, walking the room or blessing people or calling people up to receive an apport from the materialized being. And, if the being touches their hand, then they're allowed to touch back. But otherwise, we ask for anyone in the room not to touch because they're connected to us. So it could be through our solar plexus, that ectoplasmic cord. And if someone was to come and turn a bright light on or touch them or whatever it may be, it could shock the ectoplasm to snap back into our body, almost like a rubber band effect. So that would be detrimental to the
Yeah.
medium. It could even cause death.
Have you directly experienced that when it did snap back?
No, and that's one reason that I started working in light. I started with candlelight, and then now I work in the red light every week. I'm trying to build myself up to where I can work in the light and have
Yeah.
most of this happen, which
Yeah.
it's longer to develop yourself though, but it's okay. It's worth it, I think.
Yeah.
I want people to see with their own eyes because it's easier to believe. It's hard to
Yeah.
believe all the things that are happening when you can't see them. But then you also have to know 99% of what's out there we can't see with our physical eyes anyway.
Tell us what it feels like when you are having a transfiguration, when you're having a spirit talk through your body. What does that feel like?
So I have 2 different ways that spirit might use me to speak through. If I am doing a dark room seance, then it's an independent voice. It's a materialized vocal vocal larynx that they materialize, or an actual full materialization. So when I'm in full trance, I don't feel anything, and it sounds exactly like my guide is Dual Cool. He's known as the Tibetan that used to work with Alice Bailey.
Oh,
So he's ancient, and you can hear it in the vibration of his voice. It's not going through my larynx. my vocal cords. It's his projection of his spirit body of an ectoplasmic vocal cord.
Next question.
I have one. Should I continue teaching development of intuitive and mediumship?
Yes. But I will give you some homework.
Okay.
Study all the mediums of the past. The good, the bad. And when you come to Helena Blavatsky, read the secret doctrines and teach that in your development classes. Do you understand?
Yes.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
One more question.
How do I best use my gifts in the world?
By not hiding them. For you have knowledge from your cellular memory that you are unaware of, and it will activate. Do you understand?
I do, thank you.
Now, Mr. Adriani.
Yes, sir.
Without the light, I'm going to call numbers 2, maybe 3.
Okay.
But first, all of you will sit and see, she calls you Johnny Boy. How about Johnny Man?
Thank you.
You will count to 30.
Okay.
Once you do, I will call out a number to come up here to receive the gift from me.
Okay.
And do not turn on the light, for it would be disturbing to the mediums.
But are you actually verbalizing as he's talking?
No, I'm in deep trance. In that instance, with independent voice, I'm totally out in a deep trance. So I don't know, he's materialized. I don't know what's happening. But on my weekly circle, when I'm working in red light, they do come through and they speak through my vocal cords, more of a channeling, that type of thing.
Okay.
And I will allow questions and answers so that it's helping me, it's helping my spirit team learn to work with just, I mean, half the stuff they ask, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of college. I don't know a lot of stuff. So it's very apparent that it's not my information, the answers that they're getting.
Because you think the answers are kind of more
Oh,
intelligent than you would have.
yeah. Yes. I don't know a lot about physics or anything like that, you know.
And when you are having them come through you more so with channeling, what is that like for you? Are you very consciously aware of what they're saying? Do you feel them in your body?
Depends because it's like a collective that I work with. Certain ones I might come out feeling start very itchy and come out very, very itchy, like cobwebs everywhere. But during the seance, during the actual work, I am somewhere else relaxed, like reclining. That's my happy place that I go to, almost like inside of a cloud where I could relax and not worry. So I sometimes hear it or it's very muffled or muddied, but I know it's coming through me. And then I can see on my recordings, because that's another thing I do. I feel it's very important to record all this for history, for learning, for others to learn. And sometimes all the phenomena can be over except for the spirit speaking, and my face, my body is sitting still, and the spirit's head, I mean, on the recordings, it looks like my nose starts moving and it's over here, and then the rest of my face follows. It's almost like that puzzle of that old man with the beard face. You know how you can move the pieces?
Yeah.
It kind of sometimes gets pixelated. And even after, when we're done and we've said our closing prayer, sometimes you could still see the spirits. I mean, I should probably sit there longer and really come back fully into my body, but we've already spent 2 hours of somebody's time and they come every week. And I'm very conscious and thankful of their time and dedication. So I'll just kind of sit there and they are giving evidence of what they saw, but things are still happening. My face is still going all haywire. And so that's weird.
Yeah. Do you ever get scared or worry that maybe something is coming through that you really wouldn't want to be part of you?
No, because I have full trust, absolute full trust now that my spirit team protects. Yeah. I've had at some instances that I'm not going to speak of, but where things were stopped. My
Could,
guy, like literally, people heard their footsteps coming out to stop what was happening. So that maybe somebody who might have not had good energy or whatever the case, I don't even know, but to stop them from coming up. At one time in a particular was a healing seance where everybody was getting a turn to come up and sit in front of the cabinets. And these materialized beings, masters, cosmic guides were coming and laying their hands on their shoulders for healing. But there was something that happened and it was stopped. It was someone's turn to come up and sit in front of my cabinet and it was just stopped. And after that, I fully trust. So there are some beings, some extraterrestrials, I want to say, that are they leave me more exhausted. They leave me heavier, almost like remember those old movies, cartoons like Diver Dan, when they used to wear those cast iron helmets when they were underwater?
yeah.
They have kind of like a heaviness. It just
Yeah.
feels they leave me with that heaviness even around my shoulders. Like, and sometimes it might take me another day or two to feel better or get back to myself when it's something. It's not often, but there's been a couple times and and even the messages that came through, everyone knew it was someone different. It was just totally different. So, but
And
I don't think that they're there to hurt. They're there to teach and to show that they're here to
so
help.
tell us more about those alien spirits. Like what kind of messages came through and then how could you trust that they really were there to help and not to interfere in some way?
Well, because the messages are very loving. They're very people say that they thought they were talking to them, that that's what they needed to hear. Something had happened in their life. So they're not that different because I believe we're all one consciousness. I think we're all cosmic. I mean, we're all seeded from, alien beings or whatever. I think that the ascended masters, they came to help humanity, you know? So I just feel like we're all one. We're all one consciousness. There's a lot of different species, and even on Earth, the elementals and angelic beings. We're all one consciousness. That's my belief.
Well, and you showed me a picture where your skin looked, well, it wasn't necessarily your skin, but something in front of your face looked kind of creepy. And you said you thought it could have been a reptilian or
Yeah.
something like that. Talk about that experience.
Yeah, that was a very heavy one that I felt like I didn't feel good afterwards. I knew that there was something very different. And then when I saw the images, I mean, it was almost like high cheekbones. And I mean, I see them on TV, almost like strands here, like very sunken cheeks, and then strands of like leathery, or I don't know if it
Yeah,
was,
it was like clumpy skin.
yeah,
And
very, you don't know if it was like an amphibian skin or reptilian skin. It was different. Or like insect, I mean, there's so many different species of aliens.
one of the biggest blocks to mediumship is that most people don't want to give up control of their body, of their space. But you've worked through that. And I know this will be of interest to all developing mediums, including myself, because I'm not close to being willing to give up that control to just really let them use my body in any way they want. So how is it that you are so brave? And were you always like this from the start of doing seances, or has it been a progression?
No, I was always terrified of trance. I loved mental mediumship. I love psychic work. But, the trance part scared me. It was like trepidation. I knew that once I did it was going to change my life. And it happened on that first day. So that's what I was feeling. And I practiced in some trance groups with other people, but I was like, I knew that wasn't how I was going to work. I couldn't just sit there and channel. I couldn't. I knew I had spirits around me, but they were working with me differently. They were taking selfies with me. They were showing up on the camera. They were like putting heads near my heads and big smiles. It was crazy. So I thought, well, maybe that's just how they're going to work with me. Maybe I'm not going to do that kind of trance work. So it wasn't until, with the physical mediumship and I was totally knocked out, then they just materialized and came out and started speaking. And through my practice with my circle in the red light, yeah, it took a while. I mean, I've been doing this circle for a long time. And now, I mean, 8 years ago, I would have never allowed people to be asking me questions while I'm in trance. Who knows? Well, I probably wouldn't know the answer. I didn't think I would be able to answer anybody's questions. So, but little by little, you know, I I started to trust because I felt, and through what they were telling me through the physical mediumship, through what I was seeing. I mean, I'll wake up sometimes and I just know stuff, things that I feel like, they're teaching me. Now, Dwell Cole, the way he worked with Alice Bailey was she channeled his information. And he also helped with the secret doctrine. That was a lot of his information that was channeled through Helen Blavatsky. But he told me he was not going to work with me in that way. And I was like, "Phew, thank God." I don't like to type either. I'll never get the book out.
That was a
So,
relief you didn't have to write like a, 800-page book or something like that.
yeah, yeah. So I was so happy to hear that. So the way he's doing it is he's materializing and doing his own talking without me knowing about it.
So
So
tell us more about that, the direct voice.
direct voice is when the spirit speaks through a trumpet. Okay. And how they do it is the ectoplasm circulates from the medium's body and ultimately goes through the tip here. And right about here forms a voice box. So, and it's a spirit copy of the spirit's voice box, not the medium. So it's not going to sound like the medium. It's going to sound like whoever's talking from spirit. Okay.
And
That's direct
ho-
voice.
hold on. So if that instrument is like 8 feet from you, then his voice is coming through that, and people can tell it's coming 8 feet from you and not from the cabinet.
Yes, that's what's special about the dark room seances. So, and I want to explain because there's direct voice and there's independent voice. So the ectoplasm is connected to the medium, and the spirit builds the voice box, and it will, it flies around the room, it dances sometimes to the music, and sometimes it goes right up into someone's face. Very close, like, that close, and you'll hear it and almost feel air coming out of it as they speak. And you can see it because it has glow in the dark tape. So even though the room is dark, you'll know where it's at. So that's direct voice. But independent voice is when the spirit materializes and creates their own spirit copy of the voice box. And it's also he's either fully materialized, or that vocal cord, the box, the voice box, is floating in the air, because sometimes it's really loud and it could be 10 feet from the medium, or anywhere in the room, and it's very loud and booming. But so with independent voice, they don't use the trumpet.
So for independent voice, it's just like coming out of thin air.
Yes.
During a seance, when the voice is coming through, what types of messages are being shared? Is it personal information for the people in the room, or is it about life lessons? What do they talk about?
Okay, and that's a very good question, because each seance, like, we might say, if we're going somewhere, we're working 3 days in a row, and we might be doing 2 dark seances because that's what people love more, because there's more phenomena. One might be called a question and answer seance. So that's when usually Lady Nada is Michael's speaker, will take questions from the audience. What we do is everyone calls out a number. We go like clockwork. Whoever is on the left side is number 1, and we ask everybody to call out so they know their number and remember their number. Now, in that instance, everybody could ask whatever they want. It could be personal. It just can't be about someone else over 18, because we don't have their permission. Like, you can't ask about your 28-year-old daughter or your son, but you could ask anything and all about you, or you could ask a question in general, or you could ask about your own spiritual path, things that might help you. So, yeah, so it's anything. If it's just a normal phenomena seance, sometimes the masters come through with lectures. And I think the one short one that I gave you had Master Katumi on there and Master Joel Cool, and that happened to be the weekend before the election, the presidential election.
Okay, so we have to hear more about this. Tell us more what they said right before the election. Don't hold back. Just tell
Well,
us some.
well, it wasn't anything personal or specific to anyone, except that their people were going to be like shook. They were going to be surprised. They were going to be, how did he say it? There'll be things happening, storms, a lot of issues. But then the gist of it was, just know that really they're not in charge, like either one of them. No party is in charge. No one person is really in charge. It's all in the plan. They're in charge. So
Well, and did they say what their plan is? Like, why are we all having to go through this right now?
they didn't say about that. No.
And I wonder if they, in saying no one's in charge, were they more describing the future state of the administration where it feels sometimes like no one's really like literally in charge, or was this really a spiritual message that they've got our backs no
Yeah,
matter what the people are doing?
it was a spiritual message that, for us not to worry, to stay in our heart space and keep going because it's easy to be happy and love everybody when everything's going great, right? But in really troubled times, that's when we have to challenge ourselves and really stay focused. It's a lot harder to stay focused in these times, but that's what we should be doing. And because they need us. Not everyone can stay as focused or heart centered, but people who are in our business and mediumship who we know that we have to be pillars of light and we can spread our light to others. So I think that's part of the most important message.
Yeah, and that is important to hear because it is so easy to just want to go into the news and into, making a change on a physical level. There's always that question like, do we stay focused on our intuitive work, or do we jump into political activism or do other things like that and really get caught up in the chaos and the drama of it all? Let's go into some of the phenomena. So tell us about your experience first with apports. Tell us about how they appear, what they are, where do they seem to come out of, and what happens once you receive them.
Okay. Well, and first of all, I want everyone to know that probably have all received apports because we take it for granted when we get a special feather or we find a special coin that we think, oh, it's from the angels or from one of our loved ones. Well, yeah, that's an apport too. So they're more common than you think, but a lot of times we don't attribute those things to being apports. But I've gotten flying feathers in a locked car on a seat, like almost to tell me, yeah, you're on the right path. You came here and you did this. So, good job. Because there was no bird in my car. So I know that was an apport.
Yeah.
But the gemstone apports through the mediumship, um, they come through me. They started just with an ectoplasmic cloud. And the ectoplasmic cloud would generally come out of my solar plexus or my heart space. And people could see it circling the room. It's a little bit luminous, so you could look up and you would notice movement or swirling. And then they would, when the time was right, they would sprinkle down over people, over the sitters. So sometimes they come that way. That's the way they came a lot in the beginning.
Now, let me just stop you there. When they would come out of you and then, did you see them coming out of you, or you felt them, or someone just saw them moving
Okay.
from out of the air? What was being observed by people
Okay.
present?
Let me explain. So when we think of an apport, we know, okay, this could be solid. Okay, now it's solid. What happens is the ectoplasm almost becomes like a vortex. Okay. When an apport comes to a vortex, you have to think of it as energy. So it's not solid. It's coming through as energy, and then it's like a gas. And then when it hits the 3D, turns into a liquid, and by the time it hits the floor, it's solidified. So that's why some mediums, it could come out of their eyes, or it could come out of their heart space, or under their tongue. It depends, um, because they're not coming out as a solid. when it happened to me, the one time I was awake and it happened to me where some came out of my eye, it felt to me like a tear. And when I was looking and they had the cloth there to catch it, and then by the time it hit the cloth, it was a little crystal.
What size was it?
Maybe a quarter of an inch.
How many came out of your eye?
It's hard to tell, maybe 5 or 6.
And it
Maybe
didn't
5 or
hurt?
6.
It
It
didn't
didn't
hurt?
hurt. That didn't hurt. I felt them, but it felt to me like a tear because I was emotional because that time I was my husband helps. He's like the person who sits on the side to help, like if the spirits say something needs to be done, get the red light on or move this or, do that. So he was told to to cut the ties for me and the other medium, Michael. And he was all nervous because they had never said to do that before. And they told him that that he needed to bring me out of the cabinet and I would not be in trance. So he was so nervous, shaking, cutting the zip ties. He cut me a little bit because his hands were shaking like a leaf because he was worried of what would happen. But so and then he got me, he like shook me out of trance and got me up. And of course I was still very woozy, but it was so wild because both mediums were brought out of trance right out in the front of everybody. They had red light on us too. So it was in the light and I was not in trance. Some came from my forehead. I know it's hard to believe. And some came out of my eyes. And everybody that was there got to witness it.
Wow. And what happened to those items afterwards?
I gave them away. I usually give them to people, and there was something I think there was, like, exactly enough for everybody who was there. That's another thing that usually happens. We don't usually get a lot of extras.
Yeah.
Uh, so I know the very first time I got a batch, you know, Michael, who was my teacher, he said, "Well, you could keep them. It's perfectly fine if you wanna keep them, or you can share them." And
And
I
now,
if I kept them, yeah, I felt like, well, I better share them so they give me more.
don't want
It's
to
like,
be greedy.
don't start having enough for everybody.
And so Michael is very experienced with upwards, and he was your teacher as well.
Yes.
Talk about what you've observed with Michael.
Yeah, he's been doing it. He likes to do his apportations through under his tongue. He says the skin is less because he's learned to do the apportation in the light. So, and I'm like trying and studying to do that, at least in red light and stuff. But so he can do it in the light and you could see it. Unfortunately, there's people who can't believe it, even though they're seeing it, or they'll say that could have been regurgitated or something. And I think that's why I don't want to do it there. I would rather let them see it come out of here or just out of the clouds because there's no way I could be reaching up in the clouds when my hands are tied. But I mean, he's very gifted and you know, Saint Germain is an alchemical master, and so he works in the seance room with us, and he's like the master of
And
alchemy, creating vortexes and putting out the apports.
and so what are some of the apports you've seen Michael produce? And did they always come from the mouth or did they come from somewhere else?
Um, Generally has come from the mouth, but when we are working together, oh, it's sky's the limit. Sometimes we combine our energies and it's like a rainstorm. It depends on the group and depends on our teams. what they feel is necessary. Like, we don't plan it. We kind of can have an idea. We'll say, okay, tonight we'll work in the dark. Tomorrow we'll work with red light. But as far as exactly knowing what they're going to do, they don't really tell us anymore, because then we're going to worry about it.
And you were at a UFO conference and did a seance there where there were a lot of crystals that seemed to come from the ceiling and just fall. Was that the one where they fell into a bowl that you were holding?
Okay, yes, I was now holding the bowl. The bowl was outside the cabinet, like it is here. This is the bowl I work with. And that was the first time I used this bowl. I was told to go get a crystal bowl and something to put it on wood. So, and it was like the day before I was supposed to leave. So I hurried up, ran, I found that at Home Goods, and I thought, okay, it's crystal and this is wood. So I brought it. During that seance, the ectoplasmic cloud went all around the room from me, and I apported 1,881 crystals.
1,881 crystals?
That's my record.
And how many people were present when this happened?
I think there was about 36, 37 people. It was a nice big crowd, and they were very boisterous, but it was a UFO crowd. And in the beginning of the seance, not everybody, but granted, not everybody was looking, at the same thing at the same time, but at least 10 people noticed up over the cabinet, like where the bowl was. First, it came through the ceiling, a light beam. Some people saw light beams, some people saw an actual craft, because something opened up from the light beam, and that's what dropped. And I have some here. 20 crystals. And all of them were sacred geometry. And all of them are so just beautiful.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
all different shapes. So I didn't keep them all. I was told later by my team I was supposed to keep them all. I gave 8 away just because I felt like a connection with those people. And they're using them for their own spiritual tools. But now I still get some of these because I'm supposed to get those 8 back to use.
But you said there were like 1,800. Do you still have like 1,600?
What I did, what we did, because I felt bad keeping like the rest of these, but we have little bags that we usually give the gemstones in. We scooped up. Probably each person got 40, 50. We scooped them up into little bags.
Those are like the special ones, but you had
Those are
like
the
littler
special,
ones
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And have you had those tested?
I gave one to a scientist, and he said he thought they were used for propulsion.
Would you be open if I could find you, say, someone like a material scientist? I'm thinking maybe someone at Stanford
Yes.
or
I
Harvard
should
who would
love.
be willing to do an investigation of that material. Would you be open to that with
I
one
would
of
love
them?
that, actually. And another thing I received in this bowl that I would love to have tested, it was vibhuti ash. I don't know if you know what that is. And now it's a holy ash. And if you've ever heard of Sai Baba or Babaji, he was like the one who would like just the ash would come out of his hands and he would bless people, and it was for healing. Well, when we were in a healing seance one time, and I wasn't even supposed to be there, it was supposed to be only Michael. And he's like, come on, I need someone to help. So I went with him, and I brought my bowl, and he did his apportation. And in my bowl, afterwards, there was all this holy ash from Babaji. And
And
so
that
he showed me like the mudra to use for them to put it on their forehead and where to put it for certain people for healing. So I would love for that to be tested. I have a little bag. I should use it on myself, but I mean I could spare a little bit.
that's fantastic. And I know you and myself have talked about your willingness and openness to be part of a research project where experienced researchers would come in and really set up testing conditions, and you're open to that if it's the right research team.
Absolutely. That's that's kind of why I do this. It's not about show it all. It's about opening minds, and teaching people that there are these spiritual beings that want to help humanity, and they're here, and they're all here again from the Atlantean times. They're back, and they're here to help us. So I would love for people to feel closer to them and to know that they're real. It's not just something you read in a book. That's not, they're not gone. They're back.
So you mentioned zip ties. And again, for people that aren't familiar with the seance setup and tradition of trying to at least give some kind of semblance of like, oh, we're doing things scientifically. Can you explain the zip ties and the procedure you go through so people can have more confidence that you're not cheating in some way?
Sure. So the zip ties, we use the normal ones that you would find at a construction store or, Home Depot. You get the large ones. We, and first off, we don't ever know where we're going. When we get asked to go, like for instance, if in California, we would never have been to that place. We didn't even really know everybody. So there's no way we would be familiar with the room or even the chair they're going to give us to sit in. All we ask for is a chair that our arms can be tied down in, like an armchair from a dining room or something. So we ask for the chair, and then we pick somebody from the audience, the crowd, to come. One person to put the zip ties on, another person to put the duct tape over our mouths. So that they're sure that's not us speaking. And Michael takes it a little bit further and he puts water in his mouth and holds it there with the duct tape.
Oh,
I will
wow.
I got a choking here. But
That,
um so
that
anyway,
sounds pretty uncomfortable.
yeah. The zip tie is long and it's very simple, but we let them put our arm down and tie it right there, like tight, because there's no way we could get out of that. Plus, not to mention, we swell up when we're in trance because you have to think all the ectoplasm that we are extruding in the seance, it makes its way back to us eventually, but it's not all back where it should be. So most physical mediums are not in the best of physical shape because you really also allowing spirit to manipulate your body fluids, your nervous system. So we swell up and then they're really tight. By the time they cut them off, they're really tight. But we are strapped in those chairs and our mouths are sealed
Now,
during this.
can the chair itself, like, could you kind of hop with your chair or move the chair back and forth, do you think?
Mm, I no, I mean, I guess you could if you wanted, but what
But
would that be? I
well,
wouldn't.
and I was asking because you showed me a video where there were two cabinets and there had been a video camera from the top in the store and you didn't know it
Oh,
was filming.
yeah,
And you do see the cabinets moving around and shaking. And I
yeah.
was thinking, from your perspective, where you're just sitting there and you're not shaking them, it's like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And you can see it that they're shaking so much. It looks really
That
incredible. But
is
from a
it.
skeptic's perspective, if they didn't trust you, they might be like, oh, well, someone inside might just be going like that.
We would tip our chair over. And you know what I mean? But if you saw Michael, you'd like, we're not going to be hopping, but, but I get it. But also our hands are tied. So sometimes the way those cabinets, I mean, sometimes they even walk, not only twirl, because that's the vortex of when our guides are coming in. That's what's happening during that time. But yeah, I mean, try it for any skeptic out there. Hey, if they want to get tied up and sit in my cabinet and try to do that, power to you.
And and so you said that Michael will sometimes have water in his mouth and he's got duct tape on his mouth. Is he still producing the outports through that at that time?
Well, no. So he does that during the seance part because his guide speaks through the trumpet, direct voice. And so that's just his way of proving to people it's not his voice. Okay. But which you would know anyway, because it's such a high pitched voice. There's no way. I mean, I think he's been tested electronically. There's no way that his vocal cords could produce that sound.
Yeah.
But after the seance is over, before he apports, then he, spits the water out. And when he puts the water in, they put a line on a little cup. And so when he spits the water out, it's the same amount of water. So he's held that water in his mouth that whole time,
Wow.
even though he's in trance. But the guides take care of you. That's what I mean. You have chemists working with you, you have physicians, we have a whole team of scientists taking care of our physical body, preparing us.
And talk more about that. How is it that spirits could be scientists and doctors? Tell us more
They
about
were
that.
doctors and scientists and physicists in real life before they passed. So this is their way to continue working. I know, I don't like to say their names. Some people know that worked with me that know what I do now. But there were some physicians that I worked with that passed that have come through to me to let me know that they're there. And even mediums of the past, physical mediums of the past work with us in our cabinets.
Can you say some of their names?
Well, I will say for the doubters, it was documented and we have it recorded from a seance in Buffalo. Hold on. Leslie Flint comes in every now and then. He works. Um,
And Leslie Flint was strongly known for his direct voice work. And there are hundreds of files of the
mhm,
recordings that he
yes.
did with the voice being suspended in air. There's a website run by the Leslie Flint Foundation. So
Ugh.
that's interesting that he's one of the spirits that works with you now.
Well, and also it's kind of nice when it's cross-validated. I have a friend, her name is Sandy Inga, overseas in England, and she does a lot of my spirit portraits. So I don't know if you can see some here. She does a lot of them. And anyway, she was doing one, and I did not know. Um, I never know who she sees and who's going to paint until she's like done and has done it. And it was him, but it was a very light gray background. And that was the same day I was doing my circle. And we didn't have a lot of phenomena that day because whoever was working my red light, they had it on like full blast and there was a lot of light. So when I was channeling at the end, and that's what the spirit said, that there was too much light in the room this time. So not to have it on full blast. So that was the theme of the day, that was too much light. Well, there's a time zone difference. So when I woke up the next morning, Sandy had said, well, they told her in her spirit painting there was too much light and she had to repaint the background into black. I thought,
Wow.
that's confidential because that's the message that we were having, you know. So she repainted the background into dark, and I've never worked that full blast red light again. But it's little synchronicities like that. People in a different country being able to give you a message that's meaningful.
And she was having that at the same time that you were having those communications so
Yeah,
far
yeah.
away. That's really cool.
And then another medium brought up who does precipitated art. And that's another thing that Michael and I have created. I don't know if you're familiar with precipitated art.
So tell us about that.
So that is art that is painted without human hands. So we've had it come through where we didn't have any paint or brushes. We just brought some small canvases, like the mini canvases,
Uh,
and they've created art on it, oil paintings, but they're miniature.
And
So,
and there was no paints or brushes in the room, and it was the same canvases that you brought in. Did
yeah,
you at what point did the painting appear on them?
during the seance part of it. So we did one in Lilydale, and that's one actually, we didn't have any paints. And people could see it was actually a class we did and a demonstration, and three were produced. And one was a loved one of a woman who's like her husband was the president of Lilydale, and it was her grandmother. And it was a likeness, and it was actually sepia tone, the paint, which she said the original picture of her grandmother was sepia tone. So,
Wow.
I
Do
mean, we wouldn't have known that.
do you have any of those still in your possession?
Yes, I kept two of them. I kept one of my first ones, and I kept another one that we did in Virginia.
So if we were going to send those to a material scientist, we could do that too. That would
Yeah,
be
as long as you
great.
promise not to mess them up.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
One of a
Yeah.
kind.
Well, I'm serious about really wanting to get together with some reputable scientists and do some more testing here. Because, of course, there's going to be people watching this interview who are so fascinated and totally believe there's going to be a lot in the middle. And there's going to be some hardcore skeptics who are, they've probably already turned off their TV sets. But, so this
Okay.
really is, and I know amongst parapsychologists, there's general agreement that if we are going to study this, we are going to have to do it more so with controls that the researchers set up to begin with. But I
Mhm.
love the idea that you would be open also to researchers coming into your home and setting things up.
Yeah,
And
I think for us it would be nicer because this is where we sit weekly. You know, this is where our home spirit team is. Of course, we don't mind traveling, but it doesn't matter, but it makes it easier. And I think more could get done and proven consecutively, one day this, one day that. So,
yeah, and we'd want to have consultants come in who, already have thought this through, but I'm sure like where they said, okay, like you and your husband and Michael leave the room. We're going to take a couple hours and, set everything up,
yeah,
explore what's here, set up,
well,
whatever.
here. Oh,
Exactly. And
yeah.
maybe set up, recording devices and stuff, and they'd have to work with you. Something else you said when we were talking about for this that struck me, where you said that you are open to working with different equipment, recording devices and stuff. It can be helpful if you start to practice with it in advance. Like you said, it can take you some time to get used to having computers in the room or things like that. Can you
Mm,
talk a little bit about that? Because I know at some point you started to do seances over Zoom and at a
yeah.
distance, and there is always light coming through a computer, at least some kind of light.
Well, yeah, I have gotten really good at, let me show you one. Well, those little plugs like this. Like last week, I thought I had all the light out of a room, but then the extension, then one of my sitters sat the whole time, the little blue light there, and she held her finger over it the whole time, because if it's a dark room and even the tiniest light, it looks like a big light, because everything's so dark. So, yeah, I work with my laptop, and we have it, we'll turn all the light down as far as it'll go, and we tape off and cover up with a towel, everything that we can. There
Yeah.
is a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of light, but not very much. But yeah, when you're bringing in different devices and some cameras, the tiniest green dot could throw it off.
And have you felt like it has thrown it off? Or again, how much is going back to the history? For example, Helen Duncan, there is this whole story about how she may have even died because she was exerting ectoplasm during a seance. I think it was some police officers who raided the seance that some people set her up.
Mhm.
They came in, touched her, and then a week later she died. And then there's been other stories of mediums in the past who had a bad effect when people tried to touch the materializations or touch them. So, how much of your whole setup now and some of your concerns is based on those stories versus is based on your personal experiences?
Well, it's based mostly with the touching of ectoplasm on the stories, because it's one thing our helpers do. Like we know everybody doesn't know all the rules, or so we actually take a half hour, 40 minutes beforehand, and that's one of my husband's jobs. He will go out and explain to everybody the whys or the this, or we wouldn't want a lot of shiny jewelry, because that could reflect a little tiny light. There's a lot of rules in physical mediumship. They don't want you to bring your phones in, because someone could turn their phone on and try to record. I mean, nowadays there's even the cameras on eyeglasses. It's not that we're trying to hide anything. I mean, I'm trying to work in the light every week to
Yeah.
protect myself, and so my spirit team is used to it. But it's kind of hard because there's not as much development. There's not as much materialization as in a dark seance. It's like night and day, but it's different.
And what about night vision cameras?
I bought some, and I actually worked with them a couple of months. It was probably about 2 years ago. And it seemed, I mean, it didn't bother me, didn't make me sick or anything, but I don't feel as much materialization. People could see, but what they saw when they saw a figure was almost like, on Star Trek, when they would see a being, like it would be the shape of a human, but kind of looked like static or like a movement.
Yes.
So it was different. It was just totally different.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's I used to see
mm,
something like that in my parents' doorway almost every morning, and I found out some years later that my twin sister would see the same thing, but we didn't talk about it till later, and we would both just like get up our nerve, count to three, and just run through the figure so we could get into my parents' bedroom. But it looked like that. It was outlined like a human, but with like kind of that TV snow in the middle of it. You couldn't see a face or anything. What do you think that is?
I think it's spirit. I think it's, some people see spirit differently, and some spirits' energy is different, but in the light, that's kind of how they look. So it was just taking people longer to realize what they were seeing, because we had worked in dark and we had worked in red light for so
Yeah.
long. It kind of like were kind of home, they weren't appreciating it that much. So we did it, I don't know, a couple of months, and then you don't want to lose your sitters.
Yeah.
Believe me, they are hard, and you know, they dedicate a lot of time. So I just said, well, we don't, we tried it. We got a few things, but it wasn't a lot.
And was that on the camera they were seeing it through, or just with their eyes they would see the figure, but not like in the way they might with
Through the
materialization?
camera, through the camera. The ones that were in person, they could like sense and feel, but they weren't seeing that snow.
Mhm.
They would just see more of like a dark shadow in
Okay.
the room. But on the camera, they were seeing it, and they were seeing it. I know our circle leader, she had it hooked up to her Zoom, and so then she could replay it, show everybody. So, I mean, we did try it. We gave it a run, but we weren't so excited about it.
Yeah.
But for
Now,
people who are thinking, oh, there might be doing something wrong or there's fraud, they're not going to see anything on there. I mean, they might catch a
yeah.
spirit or something walking around if they know how to see them. But I don't know. It just wasn't my thing at the time. But I have a set.
So you have said that you've recorded all these, at least the Zoom meetings. Have you recorded your other seances?
We only voice record. We have a couple years of voice recordings. And oh, I have to mention my book if you don't mind,
Sure.
because many, 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 many of those recordings. So if you've never been to an actual seance, in the book, Messages from the Beyond, One Woman's Journey Through Physical Mediumship, it's my story in the beginning of how I became where I'm at today, working with Michael. And then there's at least 8 or 9 live seances from the beginning to end. So we walk you through, we talk about everything that goes on, all the protocol, what we're using, if we're using a flute, trumpets, what kind. So it's an inside bird's eye view to the
That,
seance.
that's fantastic. Has that been published yet? Is it available yet?
Just about. It's finished, and it's with my friend Desta, who's going to get it out there for me through Amazon.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations on that.
Thank
And
you.
is there anything you can show us in your room? Because you are sitting in your seance room, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you show
Uh,
us your cabinet and just some whatever you have in there of interest?
well, I'd like to show you this other. This is an older trumpet, and notice how it gets deteriorated. This trumpet belonged to Keith Milton Reinhardt, and it was actually apported for him to use. So this is one we don't use it any longer, but from the ectoplasm flowing through it, it got deteriorated.
So
And
did you see it like over time deteriorate? Was it better in better shape when you had it in your possession
uh,
or
yeah, it was in a little better shape. We used it for a little while, and then I said, Michael, this is museum stuff. We don't use this anymore. I just brought it in here to show you. It's kept in a glass case.
and will that sometimes levitate? Have you had
Oh,
levitation with these objects?
absolutely. Yes, it will levitate. It
Tell
doesn't have to be metal to levitate. Now, can you see? You can kind of tell there's drops of ectoplasm still in there. We never wash these out. So
so
that's
that would
left.
be the white stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Let me see.
And when people are seeing those levitate, like how high off the ground do they go or off the table? Like, are we talking towards the ceiling? Like that?
Oh, yeah. In my other house that we just sold, we did seances upstairs for years. We had cathedral ceilings, and they were, I don't know, 26 feet before to the ceiling fan. I mean, it would go up all the way to the ceiling fan. Like, and in Wisconsin, when those crystals were delivered, that was almost like a pole barn situation that she used for gatherings and things like that. So it also had a very high ceiling. And the trumpets, I think there were 5 or 6 trumpets up at the same time going through the crowd from both of our cabinets.
And
So
could people see those because the red light was on, or how do they know it's up there in the dark?
they're all illuminated.
Oh, because you've got the tape on them.
Yeah, we've got the tape on 'em, and on some of mine, I have hearts on the inside. So when it's like this, they can see it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of light
Okay.
because before we do a seance, that's also part of my husband's job. We'll take like a white, strong flashlight and you activate the tape. And so that makes them really bright.
Awesome. Yeah. What
Yeah.
else can you show us?
Let's see. Let me unplug this. Just a moment. So I said I have a lot of spirit paintings. There's
Oh,
all
yeah.
types of guides and this isn't all of them, but there's just not enough room in here. But let me stand up. So this has been a guide of mine forever. That's Ramses II.
Tell us about him.
So, he was a pharaoh in Egypt and he was, well, and if you see, there are 2 pyramids and the Sphinx. Let me get it in that photo or in that painting. That's a painting from Sandy. And so the guided message was I had a connection with him. I don't know if you know of Moab. A city is named after him. Apparently, that was one of his warring people. He did a lot of conquering in his day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my connection with him. There's some pictures here. Here is another one of Sandy,
Oh,
this
wow.
elongated head lady. And I really love this one because it has a lot of little tiny messages. Like there's a pie symbol here for an earring.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then of course the hanky. And this particular painting, and I could show you recordings. Before I had her framed,
Uh-huh.
I just had her sitting out front of the cabinet. Her face, it would come off the paper and come towards the people sitting. And it was scaring them. And my husband said, put that away from here. But
Wow.
Sandy had the same story. She said when she was painting her, she wasn't finished and she turned the light out and she was going to go, she was done for the night. And she turned around and the head was there floating.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was thinking of how kind it was for her to give you these paintings, but maybe it's really like, oh, she doesn't want these
Well,
hanging out too long.
she actually, that's her job. That's her mediumship. So anybody can call, and order one.
Yeah.
So, and that's a young, Keith Milton Reinhardt.
Oh, put it up a little. Oh, right there. Is that the dark-haired one or the
That
one?
one.
Oh, okay.
That one. When he was clean cut right before when he was starting his church.
Oh, wow.
So let's see. This is Joelle Cool.
And that's the one that does the direct voice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, independent.
Or independent voice. And that was Alice Bailey's guide.
Yes.
Well, okay.
Mm-hmm. And in another spirit life in biblical times, he was one of the 3 kings. He was Caspar. So
And
him and Kajumi and Almoria were the 3 kings.
And he sometimes materializes like fully
Yes.
during the seances.
Yep. Mm-hmm. People have gotten gifts from him, apports. They have felt his hands. They've gotten, a kiss on the forehead, some of them with a message. So, yeah, he likes to materialize.
I think if I recall correctly, I think I read an autobiography from Alice Bailey where she said that he materialized for her when she was a teenager. Am I remembering that correctly?
You know what? Yes, yes, yes. Now, yes, that's true. Now, this is a precipitated art that came through Michael years ago of Master Katumi. It almost, see, it's hard with the glare, sorry, but
No, we can see him a little bit.
you'll see it in person. It it's like no brush strokes at all.
That's really beautiful. He looks kind of like pictures of Jesus.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And all of these masters, there is Sana Kamara, who he is up there with the white hair. He's a very famous ascended master.
Mm.
He's like the leader of them.
Now, does he come through you sometimes?
He comes through both. He came through one time, and I think it was to test me. That was in the beginning, to see if I would be able to hold their vibration. And what happened to me and everyone in the seance room that time, there was such a high pitch, really high pitch, like people were holding their ears. And I felt like I was being lifted.
Wow.
And it was, I remember that. And it was him testing if I could hold the vibration that they were going to bring.
Is that what the high pitch is? Like, what do you think it is exactly?
Well, I think, well, do you want to peek inside the seance room while I'm up?
Yeah.
Before I don't want to trip. That would be great for your viewers. All right,
Quite
here.
drama.
So here's the bells.
Wow, that's really pretty.
Thank you. I sewed it myself because I wanted to make sure it was all my energy in here.
Okay.
And that chair was actually part of a foundation from Washington where Keith Milton Reinhardt used to work. It wasn't his chair, but it was a chair that they kept near where the materialized spirits would sit. So Michael was given that, and I have it now. Had it shipped here, and it matches my cabinet. So I just have a couple crystals. I don't know if you could see them there.
Yeah. Do you feel so good when you go in there? Like, do you just love going in there and sitting down?
Oh yeah. It's very healing. Yeah, and I always, if I just maybe upset about anything, I can go sit in the cabinet and it just calms me down. I feel better. And
Yeah, I get that feeling when I just looked at it. Like, it reminded me of like when you first sit down to meditate and just everything just suddenly feels so relaxed and just everything's okay. I just had that feeling as I just looked in there. Yeah, and something you told me when we talked earlier, you said that you were starting to recommend to your mental mediumship students that they consider sitting in a cabinet as well or some smaller space.
yes, that's how I teach. In our class, they start in January, and all but one has already built their own cabinet to sit in.
Wow. And why would that make a difference for them?
Because it's like a holy sanctuary. It really is. It's very powerful. First of all, the size of it. So we teach a specific size for our class. And there's something about the geometry of the size as well. I know a lot of people like to sit in those little tents or, they'll do something else, but there really is a difference when you take the time and you make one of these. It's made a lot of difference for me.
Yeah. And that's amazing that you actually sewed it and put the fringe on it and did that all yourself. Do you think it would be a different effect if someone else made it for you as opposed to you making it yourself.
Well, it would take me longer to make it my own, you know. This is the third one I've made. So this one is actually for two people.
Oh, wow.
So I made my very first one I made when I did my first seance on my own, in public, and I made it red also in honor of Jesus and Mother Mary. And I think I did that one by hand because I didn't it was so much. I don't know, my daughter had my sewing machine or something, but I did it and I didn't sew the curtains to it. I mean, my window curtains, it came out okay.
You mentioned before that people sometimes get scared with what's
Mhm.
happening in a physical mediumship circle or seance setting. And how can people not be afraid? Like maybe they're justified being afraid because there's weird things happening, there's spirits that they aren't familiar with. So, what advice do you have?
Okay. Well, when I first started doing these or when, I first started having phenomena, I really didn't know what to tell people because I was new to it myself. But now that's one reason why we do an information. We always ask, and we explain a lot of things before they even come in the room. And if someone's new and hasn't been to a seance before, we always try to sit in with someone who has been, who can hold their hand if they want. Because I've had people who do sky watches and they're very experienced and very high minded and, intellectual and do all kinds of things, astral travel, but they might in the very first seance. I mean, you see 4 or 5 of these zooming by, and I sometimes really fast. You might, say, "Whoa, what's going on?" So we try to sit them with somebody, but I've noticed the last 3, 4 years, it's never been a problem because the guides that are coming through us are so loving. Like some of the space beings that might come through on my weekly circle, they don't come through like that at a public seance.
So, there's
So
a difference.
there's a difference. That's for them trying and seeing how much I can handle. That my weekly circle is a teaching circle
Yeah.
for me to grow for the development of everyone in the circle. But in a public seance, it's such a loving feel. People sometimes they get so welled up, they're tearing up because they could feel the love. It's so thick in the room. And we have lots of angels that come in. Literally. Some people report, they felt the robes going over their bare feet as the angels were circling. They felt the rush of air, they felt the love. And a lot of people who are more clairvoyant can see them.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. So, people are having visions of what's happening and sometimes
Oh,
maybe correlations with each other.
yes, and it's such a loving feeling. We haven't had anybody afraid. Some people will always ask, "Are you have any phobias? Like, are you afraid of the dark?"
Yeah.
And one woman was a little bit, and we sat her next to one of her friends, and then we sat her next to somebody who was a seasoned sitter, and she was fine. She loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that actually. Like, I start to hyperventilate if I'm in pitch black. Have you ever had anyone who really did start behaving badly, or even though you told them, like, don't start taking pictures with flashes or whatever, that they just started to do things like that? Or are they usually pretty well behaved?
No, because we collect the phones. Not that we don't trust people, but that's just part of our protocol. Everybody turns their phone off and they're put in a basket in a locked room or, with
Yeah.
anything else, jewelry or anything. We have been allowing people with their glasses because I feel like, well, you want them to see, or if they they get to come up and get a healing or, get to shake a hand. You kind of want them to see, but we ask if they're just sitting in their chair to like put their glasses inside their shirt,
Yeah,
fold them to where the glare isn't going to be causing a problem.
that makes sense. And then do you feel that the configuration of the people in the room makes a difference with the type of phenomenon, the level of it?
Um, the configuration, you mean like how they sit or
More so
their
personality types, who they
okay.
are.
It can make a difference. And sometimes we might talk a little bit more than usual. We're trying to center the energy and the guides are working on the energy, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes.
Would
Or we will ask someone, could you move seats here? Try to even it out a little bit.
would having very skeptical people in the room have a negative impact?
Well, we expect you to be skeptical, especially if it's your first time. We know that's normal. So we don't, you know, skeptical. That's fine to be skeptical. That will not affect the phenomena. To be playing like, sending us an evil eye, being mean, maybe. But most people don't do that. And we no, we expect people to be skeptical.
And
That's
and right now I'm just asking you everything I've ever wanted to
yeah,
know about
that's
physical
fine.
mediumship. So so sometimes you're channeling these guides with beards and the beards will show up. So what does your husband think about that? Like when he looks at you, is he seeing you with a beard? Is that weird?
Yeah, it's a huge turnoff. He just says, make sure they get rid of the beard before they leave.
Before you come to bed tonight, no beards.
Yeah.
I just want you.
Yeah.
Hard to ask on that one.
Sometimes I take pictures and I send them to my sons because I have 4 sons and they mostly always have a beard. And I said, who wore it better? And they're like, stop.
Yeah, what do your sons think of all of this?
Well, they've always had phenomena around us in the house. I mean, when my father died, I got his stereo and he loved those old Reader's Digest, swing music. He had all these collections of swing music from when he was younger. And it would come on and play.
Wow.
And I moved it. It was playing in the basement and I had it plugged in there. And then so I moved it up to the living room where there was no plug, but I had room for it. It would still come on and it would still play. So they were some of them were younger at that age. And so finally it had to go out in the garage because it was scaring them. But we've had a house. There was a house I moved to in Plainfield and phenomena from day one. I had spirits speaking to me in loud voices when I was just bringing boxes in there by myself, and I knew no one was in the
Oh my
house.
gosh, really?
And our intercom would come on every night at a certain time. So we had a lot of phenomena there. And even my truck, well, my SUV, I had so much spirit around me. And at that time, I did have an experience with a UFO, classic saucer. Our subdivision butted up to a farm and I was going back to like Home Depot for the 100th time because they were building a deck and I had to keep going back and forth. And I just was about to come out of the subdivision and I saw it over the cornfield and I saw the lights. It had like lights beaming down and
Oh my gosh.
I turned my car off and shut my lights off because I didn't want it to see me, stupid thinking they wouldn't notice. And it stayed just for a minute more and then it went sideways and then it just disappeared.
How big was it?
Oh, it was pretty big. It
Like the
was
size of
about
a car?
yeah, maybe well, it was up in the air. it could have been like maybe more than 12 feet. I mean, from up high, it looked big, like a big, in the old days, those big satellites, how big they were.
Yeah.
But so when I told people, nobody believed me. They kept saying, oh, they must have been doing, those designs in the corn or something. And I'm like, yeah, but the corn's that high. It was like May. Like, there is no corn. They can't make a corn maze.
And so your boys, are they now interested in these things, or do they are they really into it, or they're accepting, but they're interested in other things? How would you?
They're accepting of me. I have a daughter too, and my grandkids will be like, oh, I'll have like all kind of psychic tools, like dowsing rods at Christmas time. They'll be, oh, let's play, let's see, and I just want to make sure they do it correctly. And then a tarot cards for one of the other grandsons. So my one son is really into UFOs because he was with me in the car when we saw that one. He was just about 9 years old then. But the other ones respect my work, but they're kind of afraid of it.
Yeah.
My daughter's been to my mediumship readings. They haven't come to a physical in the dark because one time we went to, it was during COVID, and some friends capped out. They were sick. We went to a jail on one of those paranormal investigations, and it was really haunted. And I had never done that before because I'd seen enough haunted houses in Chicago. But so I went, and I didn't have any tools or anything. We just went, and my two sons came. We were getting so many voices. We were getting more than who was giving the tour. It's funny. And I had a flashlight. I remember we were walking near the old part of the hospital in the jail, and it was the X-ray file room. And I had the flashlight on, and a big booming voice said, "Lights out, lights out." And I was like, oh my God, I apologize because I forgot. In the old days, they had to develop the film, and he was telling me to put my flashlight out. And after we went through that room, my kids were scared to death, but I asked the spirit because he was still there. I said, well, who's here? I meant like, who are you? Who's here with us? And he said every one of my kids' names and my husband. He said, Tim, Jim.
Oh my gosh.
Brown. He was funny because I wanted to know who he was.
Yeah. And he said,
But yeah, so that was funny. They keep their personalities.
wow, that's such a good example of that.
But
Yeah.
that scared them enough so they don't come to seances. They're like, oh no, we were there at the jail. No.
Yeah, it's interesting with kids because my son grew up. He had so many psychic experiences himself, but over time he was just like, "Yeah, that's mom's thing. That's not anything I'm into." But in closing, is there anything else you'd like to share? I know we've covered a lot, but just anything else people should know about physical mediumship. If you could just say one thing to the audience, well, what would it be?
There's just so much. And for me, it was a natural progression. And it might be for you too, but it's all in divine timing. And I told one of my mentors this too, because they said, well, why isn't it happening for me? And I said, maybe it wasn't in your soul contract for this life. You have everything else, you know? But you don't know until you try, but it's not for everybody. But I believe everybody should at least be open to experience some form of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful afternoon talking about just these unbelievably fascinating topics, and so much appreciate your willingness to answer all my questions.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. I don't feel like I answered them enough, but just be open-minded, and ask for the answers and you'll get them. So
Well,
thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
New Thinking Aloud is a non-profit endeavor. Your contributions to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation make a meaningful difference in our ability to produce new videos. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, Mind, Body, Spirit University, a leader in fully accredited in-person and online U.S. college degree programs in the topics we cover here. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org. For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org.
Check out our book, Associative Remote Viewing, The Art and Science of Predicting Outcomes for Sports, Politics, Finances, and the Lottery by Deborah Katz and John Knowles, available at Amazon.